Hey crafty cuties, welcome back to another fun video where we're going to make this gorgeous collage journal today. And I wanted to take a moment to thank Yesenia, one of my patrons, for requesting this video. She is in one of the tiers where you can request a video per month. I'm actually having to limit how many patrons I have now because it's getting so full, but I do have a few spots left. Feel free to check the information down below about Patreon, and I'm also going to link Yesenia's YouTube channel down below because she has a channel, and if you're into crafty things, I definitely think that you would enjoy it. We are making the entire journal together. It's a rather easy journal, starting with a cereal box, scraps, and just basic supplies that you have laying around. If you only want to see me making the collage part of this journal, I will put a timestamp down below if I remember. And if you have paper scraps, get those gathered and ready because I will also have a part 2 where we're going to use our paper scraps to make more of a paper collage journal. And so I'm really excited for that one. But for this journal, I wanted to just use fabric, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't make it end up looking more like a patchwork journal. I really wanted it to be more collagey, and I think I succeeded. So I'm starting by cutting my cereal box down, and it is going to be about 5 3/4 of a quarter inch by 8 3/4. So it's going to be a little bit bigger than if you took a letter size paper 8.5 by 11 and folded that in half. It's going to be just a little bit bigger than that. And I am starting by covering this entire piece in some muslin fabric. I just have a lot of muslin fabric, and so I personally like my journal covers to be really plush. And again, I think it always just adds to the what's the opposite of fragile? Oh my gosh, guys, I can't think of the word. Durable it is. So you can skip this step. You don't have to cover your entire journal cover in fabric, but here I'm just making sure I have a really even layer of glue, and I am using this Dollar Tree glue, you guys. I showed it in one of my shop with me videos, and I actually really like it, so I'm gonna have to try to get more when I go again. So you can see I'm using a piece of muslin that's just a little bit bigger than the journal cover here, and I'm going to just cut off the corners. You guys, I literally have no scissors that work well right now. Like, I need to get new scissors so bad, and so I'm using these zigzag scissors. I forget what they're called. I know there's an actual name for them, and they worked the best, but they still weren't great. And so you're gonna also see I'm gonna fast forward a few parts. I was running out of glue, my scissors weren't working, so I definitely speed up a few of those parts in the video because I don't want you guys to have to sit through watching me try to struggle while cutting and using my glue. So I'm kind of going through this pretty fast here, but I'm just gluing the corners, pulling them around the edges of the cereal box. I have a lot of videos showing me making full journals, so I wanted to really kind of focus on the collage part, but I also wanted to show you the entire journal process because I know I have a lot of new subscribers who are new to journaling. So I'm also taking some pieces of paper that I had cut down to just about the exact size of the front and back covers, and you can see that I'm gluing those on. This is going to be the inside of the cover, and then I also have a piece that fit perfectly for the spine. And I was just doing this part just to make it look pretty. If I would have thought that through better, I probably wouldn't have put the paper on quite yet because I did realize I wanted to sew through the cover, but that's okay. We work with it. Here is the panel that I'm going to use to do my collaging on. Now you can do your collaging straight on your journal cover or on a panel. I also wanted to cut a piece of this vintage sheet and cut it down so that it would fit on the spine and then the back cover, but I set that aside. And now I'm just going to get started and start my collaging process. So, I had already pulled out some fabrics, and I did focus on some like blues, pastel greens and yellows, maybe a little bit of pink. And I just grabbed those colors in my pile so that no matter what I grabbed, it would all kind of vibe together. A lot of times I will just mix all kinds of colors, but Again, I feel like that ends up making it look more like a patchwork style, and I really wanted this to look more like a collage. I don't know if that even makes sense. I had this really pretty piece here that I was considering using, but then I also felt like it was going to look more like a boho journal, which I didn't want. But if you would like, you can go ahead and pick out kind of more of a centerpiece that you want your journal cover to really showcase, and kind of leave that for the last part of your collaging. I didn't really have one in mind, so I just started kind of going with it and just pulling pieces of fabric and gluing them on, covering up my little panel here. Now, the reason why I chose to collage on the panel, which by the way is just a piece of cardstock paper, instead of the cover, was because I wanted to sew like around the edges, and I wasn't too sure if the cardboard that I was using for the journal was going to be too thick for my sewing machine. So, and then I guess I also kind of like the look of having an additional panel on your front cover. I'm not sure why, I just like that look, and I'm happy that I went with that. But you're gonna see when I have my second part to this video out doing the paper collaging, I do it a little bit different. So I'm using my Tombow Mono Aqua glue here, and you can see I'm just kind of randomly putting the pieces down. I wasn't too sure about some of the placement, and so when I couldn't figure something out, I would just kind of throw it to the side and then come back to it. I'm grabbing from a variety of fabrics, vintage handkerchiefs. I always forget how to say that word. Sorry, my daughter's sneezing in the background too. Anyways, laces, trims, and then I also, at the end, I grabbed some buttons and sequins and things like that. Feel totally free to add in papers. You can mix papers with your fabrics, and I honestly love that look. Again, I just wanted to focus on fabrics here, but in the future, I think I would go ahead and intermix the two. And I might end up doing another video where I use fabric and paper collaging, because I really loved this collage process so much, and it used up my scraps, and I ended up with something that I was really happy with. The lace that I just set to the side, it's white, there we go, with the blue flowers. That's a vintage lace that I had been holding on to for a long time. I got it from my friend Robin. I think her YouTube channel is still called like Turtle Creations for You. I'm gonna have to look, because I don't know if I've seen her make videos lately. I could be wrong. Anyways, she sent that to me a long time ago, and I had been hoarding it, and I was like, why not use it? So then I'm going to grab out some of my really pretty fabric roses, because I wanted to make a little cluster. Since I didn't have like a centerpiece, I was looking for a really pretty like vintage doily or something like that for my kind of centerpiece, but I couldn't find one. So I thought I would go ahead and make like a little cluster of roses mixed in with buttons, and I really liked the look, because I feel like the overall appearance of the end result is just a really soft, pretty, simple look with not too much going on, and a lot of times I do kind of overdo it. So yeah. And if you notice, I'm also using glue to hold all of the things in place. I did plan on using my sewing machine at the end, but I knew I didn't want to sew on each individual piece, because again, I thought that was going to make it look more like a patchwork style, which I didn't want. But I did want to hold everything down in place. Oh, Arlo, brother is not going to be happy with you pulling his Legos apart that he worked so hard on. Oh my gosh, guys. I've been trying to do this voiceover for a long time, and so I thought I would just go ahead and do it while she's here messing everything up. Okay, here we go. I'm using my Brother Project Runway sewing machine, and I'm going to go ahead and sew just around the edges first of my panel. And just so you know, I did let my glue dry, so I do try to do that. Sometimes it's hard with filming videos, but I have been trying to make sure I'm not having too much wet glue on my sewing machine, even though it's never done anything in the past to it. But I'm trying to, you know, hold on to this one for a long time, because I love my sewing machine. And here we go. I am going to individually sew on just a couple things like this lace, and I used a really pretty stitch here that's kind of like a wavy stitch, I guess you could call it. And then I'm just going to go ahead and sew down the center here for this piece of lace to make sure it stays on really well. And I think I'm using a zigzag stitch here, I can't remember, but I've been getting a lot of requests to do more sewing videos, and I definitely am up for the challenge, but I'm not a big pro on sewing, and I get so many questions about sewing, and I wing it, honestly. So in the top corner there, I glued down that applique, I guess it's called. And then I'm going to work on my little cluster here with my roses. And then I'm going to take a couple buttons that I had. And I am going to, with a thread and needle, I'm going to sew those on by hand. At first I was just going to use some hot glue, but then I didn't want to get my hot glue gun out. And then at the same time, a journal cover is getting kind of moved around a lot and it's up against things, and I just didn't want the buttons to fall off. So I think if you can, go ahead and sew buttons on if you're using them on a journal cover. And I'm using some embroidery floss and a little needle here, and I'm just going through a couple times, and then I ended up sewing on the rows, because if you notice they're falling off, and even though I liked that glue I was using, again, I'm pretty sure it would have eventually fell off. So I'm just going to go ahead and sew through the bottom of the rows, and then I'll sew that on almost like you're sewing on a button as well. And I'm really, really happy that I did this, because I can tell that everything is very secure. So yeah, I had so much fun making this journal, and I'm so glad that Yesenia had requested it. Here's the final little cluster. This week I've been working on a lot of patron requested videos, and you guys, we have some fun things coming. So here we go. I'm going to work on now the spine and the back panel. Now you can do a collage on the entire cover if you wanted, and that would be so pretty, but I didn't want to do that. So I'm taking this vintage sheet, like I said, and I'm just gonna actually trim it so that you could, glue the edges around your cover, but since I had already put the paper on, I didn't want to do that. So I trimmed it pretty close to the cover, and then I actually just sewed it straight on to my cover, and it wasn't it sewed on really, really easy. So I'm just going to do a single stitch. I did want to make sure I wasn't overworking that needle too much, because I wasn't sure if it would sew through the cardboard very well, but it felt perfectly fine. So I got that sewed on, and then you can see that I have it going over the spine onto the front cover, so that my panel covers that up, but I feel like it looks a lot more finished. So I'm going to use a lot of glue. Or those yelling happy birthday to you. But anyways, I just glue the cover on, and that's what our final journal cover looks like. I absolutely love it. Now I did want to take the time to show you guys how I will be sewing in my signatures. Again, I have a lot of new subscribers, and I don't want to always have to send you guys to a bunch of different videos, but because this video is long, I didn't show myself decorating these pages. I have 4 signatures, and I'm going to show you that I just have kind of a mixture of papers, and I didn't do too much decorating to the pages other than adding lace on the edges, and then I have a few pockets in here. I do have other videos where I am decorating pages and give you a lot of decorating ideas for the pages, and I will link one video down below that I did recently. So I'm making a little template here, and I'm using graph paper, which I highly suggest, but you don't have to. I have it cut down to about the same size of the spine, and so you can see I wrote top at the top, and then I fold my template in half, and then I fold it in half again. That's just going to help me have some really even guidelines so that I can mark where all 4 of my signatures are going to have their holes punched, because you want to also punch the holes into the spine. And so I'm folding this in half, and again, that's just giving me a guideline so I kind of know where the center is, and hopefully you can see, but with my pen here, I'm going to mark where all of the holes that are getting punched onto the spine are going to be. Now that center row, I'm going to end up making some X marks, and that's just so I remember not to punch that through the spine, but to use that guideline for my signatures. I really hope that makes sense here. And I'm going to go ahead and match this up to my spine, and I'm going to tape it down. Now you can see I normally do just a 3-hole pamphlet stitch, but for this one I wanted to kind of change it up a bit, and I think I did 5 holes, and you'll see that they're kind of spaced out weird. I have like 2 at the top that are closer together, and then 1 in the center, and then 2 in the bottom that are closer to one another. I don't know if there's a name for this, but I honestly just made up where they were gonna go. So you're gonna go ahead and use some paper clips to hold your signatures together. And then you're gonna see how I put the guide in the middle of the signature, and you're gonna punch the holes out. So again, I have X's marked where I'm gonna poke the holes, and that's just to remind me not to poke those holes into the spine because I only have 4 signatures. Now, if I had 5, I would use that center to also punch out into the spine. I really hope I'm doing a good job here, guys. So I'm gonna go through and punch all of the holes into these signatures at first. And you need to make sure always, the reason I write top on my template is just to make sure that everything matches up perfectly fine. Otherwise, you're going to notice that when you go to sew in your signatures, things aren't matching up. And that might be because you turned your template around or something like that. So it really, really helps, guys. So pay attention to where it says top. Once you're done with all of these signatures, punching the holes, we're going to go ahead and punch the holes into the spine. And then it also really helps to tape this down so that it's not moving when you are punching your holes. And then again, since I have 4 signatures, I'm going to punch the 4 rows of holes. It's kind of hard for me to go into detail for showing this part because it's really going to depend on what size your signatures are and how many signatures you have and how big your spine is. So that's why I don't give measurements. I would rather kind of show you how I come up with figuring out my template. Sorry, Arlo's having me pick her up. She's a handful. So here we go. I punched all of the holes, and now it's time to go ahead and sew in these signatures. Now, if you're new to this, I would look up what a 3-hole pamphlet stitch is. I'm just going to keep that part in because, guys, the struggle is real. Arlo is just, she's getting into absolutely everything. Mom doesn't usually get a break from her, which is fine. She's a great little gal. Love her to death, but, oh boy. Okay, so for this stitch that I guess I probably didn't make it up, but I don't know what it's called. I'm going to start with the center and make sure you're on your last row because I always like to start sewing in the last signature. It's just easier to work with. And I'm going to punch through the center hole to the outside of the book. And then I'm going to go up to the very next one on the top. So it's not the very top hole, but the one that's right above. You can sew back into your journal to the inside. And then you're going to go out the very top hole to the outside of the journal. And then instead of going to a new hole, you're actually going to go immediately down 1 hole, which is the second hole down from the top, and you're going to go back in through that hole. Now I wanted to go ahead and thread on a button, and if you want to do this, just thread it on. You just go in 1 hole, out the other, and then it will thread on nicely and stay flat. So you do that first, and then go back in the hole that's second from the top. I'm going to go through this one more time, so if you need to see this a couple times, you will. And then once you're back to the inside of the book, I actually go ahead and I wanted to show you what that looked like. I go ahead and actually tie the loose end tail with the piece that I just sewed in, if that makes sense. So you can see here I'm tying very tight here. Arla wants to read a book. And then you're going to go down to the bottom. You're going to go from in out the second hole from the bottom. And then you're going to go back in the very bottom hole. But again, I wanted to thread on another button. And you can thread on a button really anywhere you want. This is where I did it. And so I'm just making sure that's nice and flat and not twisted or anything like that. So then I'm going to thread back in the very bottom hole. Oh boy, you get some piano music there. And then I'm actually going to loop off this very end, and I'm going to like loop it around the very top loop and make one more tie. Or actually a knot. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stitch in another signature so you can see that I'm starting from that middle hole and I'm looping out. Then I'm going to go straight up to the very next hole, back into the book. And then we will sew out the very top hole to the outside of the book. And then we're going to go ahead and go back in the hole that's directly below. And again, I'm looping a button. Now, if you wanted to do this opposite, where you would start in the middle, but then you would go to the bottom hole instead of the top, you're going to get an opposite look. And so you'll see on the finished journal that I have like 2 different stitches, and that's why, because I changed it up on my last 2 signatures. So I like to tie off here, and you could wait till the very end and to just make one knot, but I just like to make sure it's super secure, so that's why I did that. So then we're going back down to the second to the last hole on the bottom. I'm going to loop another button. And then I'm going to go back in through the very bottom hole, back into my signature. And again, I'm going to just go ahead and tie that off so that everything is super secure in there. And I kind of just take the very end of my thread here and I just loop it under. There's basically a loop right above, and you loop it under, and then you just do a simple knot, and I just make sure it's very tight. Arlo is wanting in her crib again. So here we go. This is what the first 2 signatures look like, and you can go ahead and move your buttons around until you are happy. But this is what it looks like when you have all 4 sewn in. I didn't think I needed to show that to you 4 times, but so if you see, you have 2 what looks like longer stitches on the very top, and then 2 on the bottom row. That's because I changed it up when I sewed in my last 2 signatures. So this is the final journal. If you want to cover this area up between the inside cover and the spine cover paper, you can add some lace or something like that. I actually just used a scrap piece of fabric that kind of matched with the front. And I'm going to flip through real quick here and just show you the different pages that I have in. Like I said, I didn't do too much decorating. I have a couple pockets that were just quick little pockets, and I have a mixture of paper. I have scrapbook paper and coffee dyed paper, and the paper that I used in this journal was honestly just from my stash, and like all of my paper is really mixed up, so I'm really trying to go through and use up everything. I made this little shaker that was really, really simple, and you could put like a photo on the outside of it or something like that would be fun. Some doilies and things like that. This journal was really fun to make, so I hope that you guys enjoyed and saw how easy it was to make a journal cover using a cereal box or cracker box. So stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe, especially if you want to see the next collage journal that I'm using papers instead of fabric. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!